NXT Vengeance Day, February the 15th, 2024. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to intermix some discussion about the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, because I find it to be entertaining. I don't care about these awards, but they are worth talking about. And NXT was involved quite heavily with some of these awards, so we most definitely will be discussing it. So, NXT sold out from Care First Arena in Washington, D.C. Over 3,800 people. Pretty good. It was a little dark in the arena. I mean, that's just a problem that NXT has since Triple H took back over, is it got real dark all over again. Which is also an issue with Raw and SmackDown, as Triple H likes the arena to be dark for some reason. But there was no Ricky Starks on this show. He will be on Tuesday, where he's going to sign his official contract. Everybody's still flipping out and biting their nails over what his name is going to be, even though I don't think they're going to change it. There's no need to. I mean, Jordynne Grace, spoilers, she was on this show. She came in at the very end. Not only did she still have her name, she still had her TNA theme song. So I don't think they're going to change Ricky Stark's name, for the record. So let something happen. I know he owns his own name. Maybe he signed it over to AEW and now he can't use it for a specific amount of time. But he owns his own name, so I don't see the problem. Anyway, let's move on. Note one, really the only note, is that they will be launching WWE Evolve. And Evolve is going to have its own championship, which they have already apparently designed. So there's going to be another new belt in WWE. And knowing the way Triple H does things, there's likely going to be two new belts, because there's going to have to be a men's championship and a women's championship. That's just too many belts. Too many belts. But there's nothing we can do here. Another note before we get into the whole show. Booker T was voted the worst television announcer in the business. 2024 by the Wrestling Observer Newsletter. He was voted to be the worst. The guy who his energy and his charisma actually helped propel Trick Williams to main event status, got everybody chin whooped that Trick and going along with the song and everything. That was because of Booker T, right? They hate Booker T. They hate Pat McAfee too, because Pat McAfee was second. Now I actually agree with Pat McAfee. He's a little much, but Booker T is incredibly fun. He doesn't call any moves. He doesn't call any holes, but he does a lot of character stuff. He really puts over the characters. He puts over the stories. He doesn't pay attention to the moves that much. And he doesn't pay attention to the characters that much. But that's part of Booker T just getting on the mic and having fun with his job. I guess they don't like that he has fun. But Booker T was a gem throughout the entirety of this show, by the way. He's a gem, period, anyway. He's very fun. So, Booker T, your worst announcer. Another thing we got to discuss before we get into the body of the show is that NXT was voted the second worst televised wrestling show in 2024. Second only to AEW Rampage. Rampage has been canceled. It's gone. It don't exist in 2025. So that means NXT will likely be voted the worst wrestling show in 2025. But here's the kicker. NXT, of all the shows in wrestling, including probably Japanese shows and stuff, is the only wrestling show with increasing viewership. SmackDown has lost viewers. Raw has lost viewers. Collision is in the toilet. Dynamite is in the sink next to the toilet. It's all bad. NXT is the only show that's gaining viewers. And Shawn Michaels was voted the 5th best booker. And NXT was still the worst show. And somehow it's the only show that raises viewership. Now you need to ask yourself, how is it that this is the case? Do these people at the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, the fans who did the voting, are they in touch with what the viewers actually want to see? If the show, the only show that has increasing viewers, is the worst show. And the show that viewed, I think Dynamite won the best show. What I think it was. So, and Dynamite, of course, has plummeted. It's been in the toilet. It's around 600,000 viewers every single week, even if you include Max. but it's the best show. These people are not, they're not tapped in, let's say. This is why you can't take this stuff seriously. It's humorous that they say stuff like this. But there's nothing you can do about it. You got to have, I think, a Wrestling Observer newsletter subscription to even vote. Most people don't. I mean, it is what it is. But I just want people to recognize that. Now, Shawn Michaels made some bad decisions on this show. Don't get me wrong. Him coming in 5th when it comes to Best Booker. When you look at how he put together this show, there's at least 2 decisions on here where I'm kind of like, man, it's hard for me to vouch for you. But the first one was not a bad decision. Stephanie Vaquer defeated Fallon Henley with a spiral tap to win the Women's North American title. This was likely the best match Fallon Henley has had in NXT. It was legitimately very good. They did some actual grappling. They did the attacks from Jasmine Nix and JC Jane behind the referee's back was actually very well done too. The 619 to the springboard crossbody that Stephanie Vaquer does always gets a really great reaction. She did a really good fight scene with JC and Jasmine Nix as she was fighting them off. That was pretty good. It led to the finish. And that was very solid. Just a really good match. I mean, I don't know what you do with Fallon Henley and the rest of the girls. Maybe you call them up. But I think they should stick around for a little while. You know, it's interesting now that they lost the belts that... And Fallon Henley's been in NXT since 2020, I think. Maybe 2019. I think she became a regular in 2021 when Vince took over. When she was joined with Briggs and Jensen. And she didn't wrestle that much in her first year or so. And it took until she turned heel for her to really start getting some reps. So she really has only been, I say, running about a year or two. I think 2022, 2023 is when she really started cooking in terms of actually doing character work and being a focus on the show. Even though I think she has some matches in 2023, she won the tag team titles too. So Fallon Henley's been around for a while. JC Jane, my God, she's been there since 2020. Since she got brought in right after Evolve. So she's been there forever. Maybe it's a sink or swim situation with the two of them. I know Jasmine Nix is very new. Maybe you bring up Fallon and JC as a pair, and you know they work as tag team. That's the best option as far as I can tell. Now, it might be better to keep them in NXT and see if you can elevate Fallon Henley a little bit. I think that would be good. Also, try to give JC a little bit of a singles run too. But they've been in NXT so long, and Booker T is right when he said that 6 years in NXT is too long. And we're approaching 6 years for both of them, you know, for both JC and Fallon. We're approaching that 6-year mark. So it's time to put either shit and get off the pot. They probably gonna get called up this year. Now I'm not saying like right after WrestleMania, but as soon as possible, I guess. But Stephanie Vaquer, she's a gem. She's amazing. She hasn't had a bad match since she's been on the show. Only problem is that the English. That's the only issue there. But she's tremendous. The second match on the show, Josh Briggs and Inamura are defeated by Fraxium. This was a highly energetic match. Fraxium actually was voted the second best tag team of 2024 by the Wrestling Observer newsletter. They lost to the Young Bucks. Yes. Because the Young Bucks can work half a dozen matches in 2024 and still be the best tag team, while Fraxium can cook every other week and still only come second. But Fraxium is a solid team. Only problem I have is they haven't been involved in any feuds. They've had some really good matches. The issue is they don't have any feuds. The longest feud that Fraxium has had has been between the two people in Fraxium. Them arguing about each other and who's going to go solo or whatever. Other than that, they haven't had like a stable tag team to feud with. They've just been doing random banger matches. And this is another one. So, Inamura, I've been watching a lot of him, paying attention to what he's doing. He was good in this match. I actually like the little spring he does with the top rope when he kind of like charging up before he jumps off. Because that splash actually looks pretty badass. The issue I just have here is I did not believe Josh Briggs and Inamura could win. You know, I just didn't care. So, It was a fast-paced match. It was a good match. There was nothing wrong with it. But ultimately, I knew Fraxian would win, and Fraxian won. Anyway, after the match, a bunch of guys in masks jumped everybody in the ring. Dion Lennox was announced as being one of the guys involved. Dion Lennox, of course, was involved in a storyline where he got shoulder checked by Trick Williams a couple of weeks ago. This was how long ago was that? About a month? Maybe a month and a half, maybe. And they named all the other guys, but I didn't see what they look like. I know it's like Osiris Griffin and Shaquan Sugars. I don't know. I don't know who any of those people are, okay? But apparently, so Dion Lennox apparently is going to have himself a stable, and that's who these guys are. They don't have a stable name yet, but they're out to prove something. And they're clearly PC talent because Vic Joseph noted them as being talents that you've seen around the PC. So we're going to try. Apparently, it's going to be like a new Nexus, hopefully not a Retribution angle. I don't like that, but we're gonna give them. I'm gonna give them. I like NXT. I'm gonna give it a wide berth. I'm gonna give it a chance because this Dion Lennox guy, as a character, he's been quite terrible. He was basically a gossip girl along with the rest of the girls. He's heading on it in the locker room with his little glasses, and he's always talking about, relationship stuff and giving advice and all that bullshit, right? So now they're going to have to, on a dime, change that character. I want to see how that looks and whether he can convince me that he's a tough guy. Convince me that he's, worthy of me paying attention to him after months and months of him just hanging out in the girls' locker room. So I want to give him that time because I know he's a fairly young guy and he has almost no experience in pro wrestling. So I'm going to give him some time. But this was just a random beatdown. It was very energetic though. Like the black dude, I'm pretty sure that's Shaquan, did like a running drop kick. He looked like he was about to kill himself. But other than that, it was just like a random beatdown. Let's talk about Stax. Stax is very upset. He's disappointed in Tony D'Angelo for trusting Izzy Dame, but he's going to finish off Shawn Spears himself on Tuesday. So he challenged Shawn Spears to a match, family versus family, but he's going to cut off the head first. I like this. Stax has needed to break out of Tony D'Angelo's shadow. Stax has also been in NXT for a long time. I think he was in NXT. Was he in NXT longer than Tony D'Angelo? Well, I think they both came in at the same time, which would have been 2021, thereabout. So it's time for him to start developing his own character and his own personality and stuff. And I hopefully they've dropped his name, that Channing Lorenzo. Just call him Stax Lorenzo or whatever. But he wants to work solo. That ought to be fun. All right, so the first really weird decision that Shawn Michaels decided to make on this show is that Eddie Thorpe defeated Trick Williams. And it took the air out of the building. You want to watch people in surprise and then horror? Watch the finish to this match. All right. The finish to this match was insane. All right. Because it was a running knee strike. I don't think anybody knew what Eddie Thorpe's finish was. So nobody knew when the match was over. And this occurred. And everybody's looking like, what? What's happening? Why is this happening? And that was the same thing I was thinking. I didn't think they would ever do something like this. This is weird, right? The match in and of itself, though, I thought was a good match. Eddie Thorpe was given most of the match. He was aggressive. The crowd was with it. Gave him a ton of the heat. Shannon, fuck you. All this kind of stuff. He was doing creative stuff with the strap. He tied Trick Williams up to the ring post and was whipping him. And then when the tables turned, he was very comedic. As Trick Williams fired up and was hitting Thorpe with the whip. Thorpe was running around in circles. So he was like hitting him. He was like flailing his arms and running around in circles. It was very cartoonish, but it seemingly fit, the heel character. That said, though, the finish to this match of Eddie Thorpe basically doing a running knee to Trick Williams and getting a clean pin in the middle of the ring, very bizarre. Extremely bizarre. I know Trick Williams has had a bit of a bumpy ride in NXT. You know, he's clearly the top babyface. But it's hard to say, because it's not like they're holding back on him, because he was champion for a while. But they stopped doing storylines with him when he became the champion. They kind of focused on other things. Now he is in the middle of a storyline where he was very mad and everybody wanted to see him fight to get his title back and defeat Eddie Thorpe, who had ended up costing him the title in the first place. And for him to lose was insane. It's insane. Clearly this feud is not over. They're going to have another match, at least one other one. But I don't see that this is making money. I don't think this is... maybe it's because I don't think much of Eddie Thorpe. I don't view Eddie Thorpe as being a substantial character on the show. I'm still viewing Eddie Thorpe as being one of those guys like Dante Chen who comes and goes. If this is going to be their staple, where Eddie Thorpe is going to be a guy who's going to be featured, all right, I guess you have to make that sacrifice. But Eddie Thorpe is in Ridge Holland territory for me, where he does stuff on the show, he's featured all the time, but rarely does what he's involved with feel like it matters. You know, like Ridge Holland, when he destroyed Chase University, I naturally thought, okay, that's the most substantial thing he's ever done in his career. It's going to boost him to becoming the NXT champion. It didn't happen. Oh, okay, well, maybe he'll be the North American champion. That didn't happen. So now Eddie Thorpe, we're in the same situation where him beating Trick Williams doesn't make sense. He should not be in this scenario. And yet he is. You know? So hopefully this means something in the future, and it's just not they're trying to force this guy that don't fit into the main event. But that feels like what it is. Instead of just giving us the obvious option of Trick beating this guy and calling it a day, they decided to string this feud along. I don't get it. So, as people were, hey, Washington, D.C. is a black city. They're really behind Trick Williams. Why would you have Trick Williams lose? And, you know, people were kind of asking that question. Of course, it gets racial all the time. Then they doubled down and they had Javon Evans lose to Ethan Page. Now, this is actually a little bit more reasonable. You know, Javon Evans is working the match with, you know, an injury, you know, the jaw or whatever. So they played off that, but Javon Evans was very aggressive in this match. Very different energy from Javon Evans. It was really good. He actually bloodied Ethan Page up a little bit, but he also still did his high spots, you know, the springboards and the dives. So his stuff was still there. Ethan Page was continuing to work the leg. He also was working on a new, more aggressive character. So it's one of those things where it was a tug of war. Like, which more aggressive character do you want to put over? The heel or the babyface? And they chose the heel. So Javon Evans goes for his springboard RKO thing. He gets punched in the jaw. Closed fist to the jaw by Javon Evans, followed by his version of the twist of fate called the Twisted Grin. And it's a clean win in the middle of the ring. I wish it wasn't clean. That's my thing. If Ethan Page would have stolen this and got out, you know, and slid out of the ring to get away from a fuming Javon Evans, that would have been better. Javon Evans landed in the middle of the ring bleeding and fucked over. It's not a good visual, man. Not for a guy that you're trying to big up as a babyface. And because you keep doing this to Javon Evans, it also doesn't feel good. He is one of the most over baby faces in the show, and he always loses. You know, he always gets to a certain point, and then he gets the rug pulled from underneath him. At least this is like one of the few real storylines Javon Evans has been involved in. I do think he'll end up winning it in the end. But I would have liked for, if he had to lose this match, that he would have lost it in a cheap fashion, with Ethan Page grabbing the ropes or pulling the tights or something. Even if you want to do the punch that goes with it, okay, because the punch actually was a very good element of the finish. It made sense. But I didn't like that Javon lost fairly clean. I was not a big fan of that. Also, it's time to move Javon Evans' character forward. And him always getting the big match and then losing. It's kind of weird. It's very 2024. But Javon Evans was actually voted the Rookie of the Year for, Wrestling Observer Newsletter. And I'm not surprised by that, because he has been pushed quite a bit by like Brian Alvarez, who talks about him, and Meltzer. He's a high-flying, high-energy, fairly generic guy, which is perfect for that audience. And now they're starting to do something a little bit different with him, so maybe we can get different outcomes. But Javon Evans, I know he's young. It's not going to end his career to lose to Ethan Page, but he needs some staple victories too. He does. Unfortunately, he keeps getting big matches and then not winning them. Now, speaking of big matches, Obafemi defeats Austin Theory and Grayson Waller to maintain the NXT Championship. This was it's a solid match. It was okay. It was a mixture of Theory and Waller working together, and them also trying to stab each other in the back. Typical triple threat where the triple threat where two guys are in a tag team. You've seen this stuff before. Obafemi, of course, looks amazing. They added some hardcore elements in it to make it a little bit more fun. So there was like a table spot where, Grayson Waller I think he did like a froggy bow onto the table, onto Obafemi. Obafemi launched Grayson Waller onto the announce desk. There were some chairs and a bunch of other stuff. So they did some stuff trying to make it different, because they knew a Fatal 4-Way was the main event. But it was hard to get into this match too, because again, I did not believe Austin Theory or Grayson Waller were going to win the match. They were thrown into this match. They didn't earn it. So I didn't believe that either one of them was going to win. So it was hard to, and I always take points off of a match if the finish is obvious, unless you do something within the body of the match to get me to believe that one or more of these guys could win. They didn't do that here. So these guys were just bodies, and Obafemi just went in there and beat them. After the match, though, Dion Lennox and his group came in. They jumped Obafemi, beat him up, threw him all over the place. Okay, so they're not just attacking tag teams, they're also attacking the top guy. Now, I don't understand why they turned the lights off for this and had music and everything. I don't know why that happened. It should have just been a straight up beating like the first time, or they should have jumped him in backstage or jumped him in the aisleway or something. But they led us to believe that there was going to be like a debut or something, and it wasn't. It was just these guys again. All right. So Obafemi, maybe they're going to consider Obafemi and Ethan Page, or Obafemi and Eddy Thorpe. I'm not that latter one. I'm not feeling Eddy Thorpe versus Obafemi. I'm not really feeling Ethan Page versus Obafemi either, if we're being honest. But like I said, we got a weak men's division in NXT, so it's unfortunate. All right. So Ariana Grace brings her daddy to NXT. So Santino was there. And Santino mentions how he knew Ava when she was a child. They're beating around the bush that Santino is Ariana's daddy and that The Rock is Ava's daddy. They're beating around the bush, but it's supposed to be one of those things that you just know, So apparently they both have ideas for NXT and TNA to work together. And hopefully they're building up a Worlds Collide show. That is something that both brands kind of need. They need to have a Worlds Collide. I suggested last year that it's a 2-night event. That on night one, you do basically on TNA Plus or something like that, where, the NXT championships are defended. And then you will do it on Peacock / or is it Netflix outside of the US, where all the TNA titles are defended, or maybe even vice versa or whatever. That would probably be better. But a one night show could also be pretty good too, depending on how you put it together. But hopefully that's what we get out of this, is some kind of Worlds Collide kind of event. That would be great for a post WrestleMania show. I'm talking like June, July-ish. That could be great. Or just create a couple of Worlds Collide events. Do a quarterly one. You could have, or maybe they'll have TNA mixed into Stand and Deliver. Who knows? But I'm interested in seeing what they come up with. But I hope that it's a Worlds Collide event. The main event, Bayley versus Julia versus Roxanne Perez versus Cora Jade. A well-paced match, but a very rocky match. Essentially, Julia and Bayley have no chemistry. None. Every time they touched each other, it was a mess. Every time they tried to do anything, it was a mess. Roxanne Perez, however, was a gem in this match. She's very athletic. She's very quick. She hits her stuff. Cora Jade actually wasn't that bad in this match. Julia looked the worst, if we're being honest. Of all the people in the match, Julia probably looked the worst and botched most of her spots and stuff like that. And Bayley it is what it is with Bayley, right? She's not bad. She's like not by any stretch of the imagination. But she didn't look like the all-star, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that you would think she is. Clearly Roxanne Perez was working because she knows she got to go to the main roster soon, so she was busting her ass in this joint. I particularly liked the spots where Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez were doing. It looked like it was about to do a black backslide, and Julia put them both down, and their arms were still locked together, and she turned them over and tried to pin them both at the same time. That was pretty good. Of course, the Cora Jade Roxanne Perez partnership broke down during the match, leading to Roxanne to kick Cora Jade's ass. The Bayley Roxanne Perez stuff was probably the best stuff in the match. They worked very well together, I could say that. And the finish was a pretty strong finish. Bayley gets hit with the pop rocks on the floor. She gets rolled into the ring, pops rocks again. Cora Jade breaks up that pin, ends up hitting Roxanne Perez with the DDT. While she's going, her double arm DDT, which is her finish. She tries to go for a pin. Here comes Julia running in with a knee strike to the head. She then hits another knee strike to Cora Jade, so she's down. And then she hits the Northern Lights bomb onto Roxanne Perez for the pin. And that's it. That's the match. Julia wins. Afterwards, Stephanie Vaquer comes into the ring to celebrate with Julia because they're Benoit and Eddie Guerrero apparently. And then Jordynne Grace comes out to confront them. And basically you see that they're teasing which path she's going to go down. She's going to feud with Stephanie or she's going to challenge Julia. And that's sort of what the final image that you're left with as the show goes off the air. Let me tell you, as a show, it was a good show. It was action-packed. There was no wasted motion. There was a lot that occurred. There was not much in the way of character development, but that's typical of pay-per-views nowadays. But there are some big issues. The debut of this Shield-like gimmick, I didn't... It was okay, but you're debuting 4 guys at once, only one of whom has a name that anybody has ever heard before if you watched NXT. And then even he was a Gossip Girl previously. So now you're going to change his entire presentation. I'm talking about Deion Lennox. He was in the girls' locker room, or outside the girls' locker room, chatting up and being the shoulder to lean on and all this kind of stuff. And now he's supposed to be like some kind of badass. Look, I'm going to give NXT the opportunity to pivot, to do that pivot, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be real interesting. But this mixture of Retribution, the Nexus, and the Shield is okay. I think the biggest foibles of this show is Eddie Thorpe and Ethan Page winning. Jesus H. Christ, bro. Like, I get it. I truly get it. You do need strong heels on this program. But my God, Ethan Page and some of the decisions, the Ridge Holland decision to destroy Chase University, now Ethan Page, now Eddy Thorpe. These guys, I don't think that they're strong enough heels. I don't think that they're interesting enough to sacrifice Javon Evans, who is one of your top baby faces, and Trick Williams, who is your top baby face, or to sacrifice Chase University to Ridge Holland. These guys are not strong enough characters, strong enough performers, in order to get that over. You're really only hurting the guys who were beat. Now, like I said before, Javon Evans is fairly new. This not hurt him at all, but Trick Williams looks like an idiot. This doesn't do him any good. This is a situation where Trick Williams, if he was the star of the show, if he was the John Cena of NXT, he wouldn't have lost this match. And he should be the John Cena of NXT. He should not have lost this match. And Javon Evans shouldn't have lost either. I'm actually starting to think maybe Shawn Michaels might be the fifth best booker. Look, he makes more good decisions than bad. But today he doubled up on the bad decisions. And of course, the race angle plays into it too, because they had Washington, D.C. again, Black City, and their two top black baby faces lost in back-to-back matches, both clean. You can't do that, man. You can't do that. You have to protect these guys. I mean, Trick Williams especially, due to the fact that he is primarily what people are tuning in for. And what they have done since he became champion has been abysmal. The lack of feuds when he was a champion. Then they finally got somebody up on that level in Obafemi. And then they avoided doing Obafemi and Trick Williams one-on-one. And now they're still avoiding it by having Trick Williams have this extended thing with Eddy Thorpe, who nobody cares about. Javon Evans is, he's still fairly new, but as I said previously, you can't keep putting him in these high-profile situations and then he loses, because then eventually people will lose faith in him. And the same can be said for Trick Williams. You just cannot do this in perpetuity. But I get it. NXT has a very weak men's division. So you feel like you have to play the cards that you're dealt. You've got this Eddy Thorpe, this Ridge Holland, these guys are still around. You feel like you have to do it. But you don't. You can find other guys, There are other people that you can use. And the reason I'm kind of bullying Sean over Eddy Thorpe, Ridge Holland, and Ethan Page is because these are the blandest guys on your roster. These are three of the blandest guys on the roster. They have no frills about them. Nobody is excited to see them ever. You're trying very hard, and I respect that. But no, just give up the ghost. Find somebody else. Bring somebody from the main roster to NXT to add some flavor to this thing, because the guys that you're choosing to push, it's not going to work. You need to just rewind this, have Javon go and kill Ethan Page, have Trick Williams squash Eddy Thorpe, and then we can pretend this never happened, and then let's get some actual people in here who can be stars and can actually elevate Trick and Javon. And the tag team division too, because the tag team division is a mess. All right? These are just random matches. There's no feuds for Axiom and Nathan Fraser. And that's a problem too. Not having anybody on the roster to lift the tag team division just means you just have random matches, which is fine. But then Fraxium wins and then there's no way forward. So that's a big issue. While the show was good, it was a good show from top to bottom, those two finishes, were problematic. Trick losing, Javon losing, but that's a matter of being subjective. I understand what they're trying to do, though. What they really need to do is inject some energy into this male division. Now, I'm not sure that this Nexus Retribution thing is going to work, because you're debuting 4 guys at once. It's going to be hard to individualize them. it's going to be hard to get anybody to care about them individually. And they need to be individual stars. So we'll see how they roll that out. And then, of course, they have Ricky Starks coming. So they got that in their back pocket. But they need some help, you know. And the booking is not really doing them any favors. But it was a good show at least. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort, so question as if you worship.